A lot of times when clients come to us, they're looking to invest significant. You're talking six figures, seven figures over, call it 12 months. When you start talking to them about their brand, their story, who they are, who they want to be, sometimes they don't have this stuff straight.
They'll come to me and say, "Hey, we're going to a trade show, a festival. We want to be able to look our best, be our best." And if they're going in and trying to pitch themselves to this event and the event's like, "I don't really get what you do or who you are or what you stand for," maybe they'll pass. And that has happened before. It's like a big smile, "Hey, what's up?" And it's not this
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, here's this is what we are." It's not this like really unauthentic, thing. "Hey, welcome
Hey,
in."
my house, we're this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like you're not doing
We're
that.
neat freaks. Yeah.
Right,
I gotcha.
right. So you want to welcome somebody in calmly and like, "Hi, like, how are you?" Welcome very
Yeah.
warmly, exactly how you would welcome your best friend into your home.
What's going on, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockaway Exhibits. Today, I have Laura McKinney with me. She is the founder and CEO of Strata Brand. They are a strategy firm out of New York City. Laura, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm really excited to be here.
Tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about Strata Brand, what Strata Brand does.
All right. So Strata Brand, like you said, it's a strategy firm based out of New York City. We focus really on amplifying the stories of the brands that come to us. My background originally is in journalism. So my roots are in storytelling. And I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of power in that when it comes to the PR marketing, event space, all of it's connected under an umbrella. And I think the common thread is being able to tell a good story about the brands that you're working with. So that's really the essence of what we do. And that's why my clients come to me. And they usually come to me with, "Hey, we either don't know who we are or we want to reinvent who we are. Can you kind of help us put the pieces together and be able to present ourselves to the public in the best way possible?"
Interesting with you saying that, don't know who we are, right? Or want to reinvent ourselves. I find that interesting. Just obviously, this is an event podcast. I know you're on here because you do event work with your clients, right? But from my standpoint, I find a lot of times when clients come to us, they're looking to invest significant. You're talking six figures, seven figures over, call it 12 months. When you start talking to them about their brand, their story, who they are, who they want to be, sometimes they don't have this stuff straight. And now here they are with me looking to invest, call it $500,000. So talk to me a little bit about the importance of brands having that message down, knowing who they are before they move into kind of like, these go to market strategies like events would be.
Totally. Yeah, you don't want to go in with like a murky story of who you are because initially, you are going to want, if you're somebody that you're working with these people, you want to be able to trust them. That's the biggest thing. You want to have a level of trust. And if they're saying their story and it's a little bit hazy and it's all over the place, there's no direction. The people that either they're working at the events, like for example, a lot of my people, they'll come to me and say, "Hey, we're going to a trade show, a festival. We want to be able to look our best, be our best." And if they're going in and trying to pitch themselves to this event and the event's like, "I don't really get what you do or who you are or what you stand for," maybe they'll pass. And that has happened before. And that's why people come to me and they're like, "Hey, we got rejected, whether it was for a media interview or for a spot at this festival or for a spot at this trade show, because we didn't really know or our team didn't really know what to do." And maybe there'll be one person on their team that thinks they know or has an idea, but then somebody in another department is not having a cohesive story of what they're doing. So oftentimes I'll be on calls or meet in person with multiple departments of a brand and say like, "Okay,
Mhm.
like let's make sure that we have cohesive, rhetoric about like what you guys are doing and who you are, because you don't want somebody to be calling the communications department and they're saying one thing, and then somebody else calling like a development department and they're saying another thing." So I mean, it's so essential. And like you said, yourself, if you're talking to somebody or wanting to work with someone and there's money on the table too, that's a huge loss, not only for like a client, like one of my clients, but
Yeah.
for you, just for from an organizational standpoint.
Which is interesting because we are pitching concepts, themes, ideas, and narratives based on the information that we're pulling from them.
Yeah.
And then, but we don't make the ultimate decision, right? So we may be telling you after talking to you and your brand about your trade show, that, hey, here's some concepts and themes and different mood boards that we've put together. But ultimately, we're not really the ones making the decision. So what I find is when we pitch those
Hmm.
and then they go back, a lot of times they're like, oh, wow, well, I have to go get somebody for this. I'm not really sure, right? Because they don't have these points down. And to me, I tell people all the time, storytelling is so important. People remember stories. And I think as a brand, when you're at an event, that's messaging, storytelling to kind of linking the dots to either your point of view, right? Or the problem that you solve. So tell me a little bit about kind of like the deliverables, what the process and steps are to being able to clarify whether it's messaging and story and things like that before you go execute things like events.
Yep. So, for example, I had a client of mine who was a clothes designer in fashion space, and they wanted to go to a festival in Venice, the Venice Fest, which is in California. Great festival, a lot of fashion, food, wine, music, everything you got going on there. And they came to me and said, "Hey, we really want to go to this festival. We want to be our best, have like put our best foot forward." I said, "Great." The thing is, there's a disconnect sometimes between the marketer and the event coordinator. And
Mm,
I see myself as that bridge between the two when I'm working with my client. And I said, okay, when we show up at trade show, because they did get in because we pitched the story, worked, you're going to want to show up. And I made a folder within the folder, laminated papers of the story of the brand. And there's bullet
mm,
points. I'm like, let's focus on three things. So their main thing was, they're kind of like beach attire, so very into that local beachy aesthetic. Okay, great. A lot of the proceeds go to some charities. So let's talk about that. And then their pieces themselves are sustainable. So three pieces, wrote like a little blurb about three of those things, put it in the folder, and made it the presentation nice. Put point of contact for the event coordinator, like who we get to talk to on their team. This is the number you can text if there's any problems. This is what our tent is going to look like. There was a digital drop of what that's going to look like, what you can expect, what you can hear. We're going to have music. This is the type of music we're going to
mm.
be playing. Very detailed so that when we hand it over to the event coordinator, we just made their lives a lot easier. That's the whole goal. You want it to be like you're working as a team, the marketer and the event coordinator. You're on the same team, and you have to remember that at the end of the day is you want to put on a great event, you want your client to look the best, and it's a whole ecosystem if every part moves the way it's supposed to be. So it's really reminding those two people, like as the bridge, that we're on the same team, we're going to make it work. And as the marketer, you want to make the event coordinator's life easier because that's what they're going to remember in the future. They're going to be more likely to call you back and say, "Hey, you did a great job at our festival last year. Why don't you come back?" And that's always the goal, is to have some sort of retention or for the word to spread that you're a class act and you're organized and you have a good product. At the end of the day, that bleeds into your brand as a whole, is really how you present yourself.
My first thought is I love what you're describing of what you did for your client because we always talk to people that there is pre show, there is the during show execution, and then the post show. There's like all these phases. And I've long said one of the most important things about during the show, the middle part, the execution when you're there,
Yeah.
is do you have everybody that is there representing that brand on the same page? Do they know the messaging? Do they know the talk tracks? Do they understand what we're doing there? And a lot of that comes down to what you were describing, which, like, this is the story.
Mhm.
This is the messaging, right? These are the details that everybody needs to know.
Yep.
Oftentimes I find when we talk to people, they don't have that ironed out. I mean, they're spending $250,000. $250,000 is just a lot of money, right? It's just a lot of money for a single event. And then they're just flying in salespeople from all over the country. No one knows any of this stuff. So Jeff, who's out in San Francisco, and Megan, that's in Dallas, who fly into Orlando for this trade show, and their salespeople, they could have two totally different views
Mhm.
depending on what message and who they talk to and the prospect that comes in. So I love that idea of like part of building strategy and advice for event marketers is you need some kind of cheat sheet. You
Yeah.
need something that has a strategic purpose that people can read and be like, oh, okay, like this is what we're doing here while we're here this week.
Exactly. And like, I get you can have it digital, you could have it on an iPad or a computer, but there's something about
Yeah.
printing it out, making like 10 copies, giving it to
Yeah.
everybody, and just saying, like, here's the physical thing. And it always, for me, and I say this to all my clients, is don't overcomplicate it. Go back to the basics, pen and paper. Let's just talk about, like, if you
Yeah.
at this event, like, what are you gonna, and I always say these things, like, what do you want to feel? What do you want to see? And what do you feel most welcome? Like those three things as a person, like not just like, oh, as a business person, but if you were walking through that trade show or through that festival, like what's going to draw you to that table? Like really simplify it. And I think the people in this industry, whether it's events or marketing, we often are perfectionists, which is a great thing in
Yeah.
a lot of aspects. But at the end of the day, you boil it down. You don't want to reinvent the wheel a bunch of times. Just really use common sense and your critical thinking skills and be like, okay, like what would I want to see? What do I want to feel? It's really that simple.
I
Mhm.
like the pen and paper notion. I mean, I am no, I mean, I'm 39, but like some of my teammates are like, "Are you 100?" It is just that simple sometimes. You know
It
what I mean?
really is.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, like how do you communicate what we're trying to do here so everybody's on the same page and just writing those things down. The second thing I had that I had a thought while you were talking before, events sit under marketing in an organization almost 100% of the time. There is always this massive disconnect between marketing and events. Typically, marketing will be like in control or like the director or the VP of something. But to me, just my gut from doing this for 14 years is something gets lost where events is like an execution department
yeah,
for events. And then marketing, that all that point of view, messaging, storytelling, problem we solve for the customer, all that deep think work and that goes into ads and go to market and all this stuff. It's like that doesn't get sprinkled into the event department. Have you experienced that? Do you know why that is or basically worked with people where you're like, wow, there's a disconnect here?
for sure. I think, and I mentioned it before, I have noticed it when working with some of my clients and event coordinators or event leaders in general, that they don't even know like what to their event, at the end of the day. And sometimes I don't know whose fault that is. Is it the
Yeah.
marketers or is it the event coordinators? And I think at the end of the day, really boils down to communication and storytelling. So it's to the marketers to communicate to the event coordinator. I do believe
Yeah.
of like, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we stand for. And then it's up to the event coordinator to be like, great, message received. This is what our event looks like. This is our expectations from you. And I think that's really important for both sides to communicate their expectations, their goals beforehand. Because oftentimes I've seen this happen though at events. Like the event's already rolling and people are
Yeah.
kind of, hurriedly whispering in the corner, like, okay, this has to happen, or this is it. And that's just like disorganized. Some of
Yeah.
the better events I've been to or have helped coordinate or organize or been that bridge to is when this is communicated way in advance. And the first thing that is put on the table is the expectations from both sides. Because
Yeah.
if those expectations fall short, then there's disappointment on both ends. And then the event and the brand don't get the benefit of what they went there for initially.
Mhm.
So I definitely think there's room in the industry for this to grow, like, or to just get
Yeah.
stronger, because I have noticed it. And I mean, from somebody who works on the inside and tries to be the person that plugs one into the other, it's not like an effortless thing, which is interesting, like you said, because it should be on the same team, same umbrella,
Yeah.
but it is some disconnect. But I do really think, just from my observation, it boils down to having that clear communication from the get go.
I think one of the good things that I'm seeing that I assume is probably good for both of us really with what we do is I am seeing a much stronger push in events where companies and executives are viewing them as a true go-to-market channel
Yeah.
versus a cost of doing business. Like we've always done this show, the booth always goes. I mean, believe me, there are plenty of people like that. Or we've always run this event. We need to keep running this, right? It is what I'm seeing now is like we've had more calls with
Mhm.
CMOs in the last 3 weeks than we've had with CMOs in the last 5 years,
Hmm.
right? Where the person's like, hey, I'm going to bring my CMO on this call And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. And the conversation is completely different when you talk to a CMO.
Right.
I mean, completely different. That
Yeah.
CMO,
Mhm.
he or she is worried about leads,
Yep.
pipeline. They're worried about the touch points, the way that they funnel in, the way that they accelerate and convert. Like that's the stuff that they are
Yeah.
concerned with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you're talking about events, they're like, well, how does this correlate? How
Yep.
is what we're doing at this event correlate into what it is the company is trying to accomplish? So I think from that standpoint, you're going to see this trickle down more where it's like, hey, great that we're going, but like, what is this overarching strategy? What are we really trying to accomplish? And are we delivering these messages to our customer
Right.
when we have the right chance in person, face to face? That's just one thing I've seen
No,
recently.
totally. I can agree more. And I do think something that I look at the hospitality space in general for kind of cues and clues about how, to merge those things. Interestingly enough,
Hmm.
'cause I think about like, think when you go to your favorite restaurant, what makes you continue to go back there? Maybe it's a story, it's a mom and pop, maybe the grandma's in the
Yeah.
kitchen cooking
Hmm.
something, or maybe when you
Yeah.
go, the lighting is just right, or the service is really good, or that smells really good. So those sensory things, that's a hospitality thing. That's not directly an event,
Agreed.
but I really do think that like things like that, because that merges kind of like the marketing side of things and an event, the hospitality world overall, like whether it's your favorite restaurant, your favorite bar, even where you go get your groceries. Why do you go back? Because
Hmm.
you know where everything is, it's consistent, you know what the price
Yeah.
is. So, you look in spaces like that for kind of cues and a little bit of
Yeah.
insight into like how you can merge those things, if that makes sense. But at least that's
It
something
does.
I kind of peek into when I'm out at restaurants or grocery stores or thinking of those things.
Makes a ton of sense. I talk about I love hotels. I really
Yeah,
do. I
yeah,
just enjoy going to them and exploring them and seeing like how they've positioned themselves,
right.
right? When you go to different JW Marriotts around the country, they do a very good job, in my opinion, of positioning each one differently. Or any nice house, a Conrad, whatever it may be, right? Depending on where it's located, the theme, the vibe of that city, the place, like what do they do?
Yep.
I like that stuff. And same with restaurants.
Yeah, exactly.
Where if you were given, I don't know, you're at an event, you were on stage given like a 30-minute window to speak, and you were talking to people working at companies that execute and run the events, right? Talking to the event managers, the event marketers there.
Yeah.
What would be like one of the core message that you would want to give them, right, from your side of things that they maybe feel like they're missing,
Mhm.
doesn't get done enough? What would be something that you think is like important, like an important message to deliver to them?
Yeah, I think you mean like when it comes to like bridging that communication a little bit?
Maybe not so much that, just like them doing their job in
Oh,
general, right?
yeah.
Like them, where should they be looking into doing things differently, thinking a little bit differently?
I would tell them, or at least speak on the topic of how important it is that they have a very clear point of contact.
Hmm.
So whether it is the event coordinator or whoever, because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh, talk to this person, actually talk to this person. And it's confusing for somebody on the brand side to be like, okay, I don't even know where I'm going or who I'm talking to some of these times. So
Hmm.
and they're like, "Oh, we're just gonna transfer you to this person." And you're like, "Okay, but who is this?" So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I would really be like, "Okay, who who are their army of people that
Yeah.
are like that we are gonna collaborate with, honestly."
Yeah.
Make it super clear, like, okay, person A, they are the person that you're gonna call when you arrive at the event. Person B is the person you're gonna call if there's any issue. Person C is like technical, so
Yeah.
that would be the biggest thing because it really depends on the events. Like some events I've been to have done this extraordinary well. That's why I know that it's possible and that it is extremely helpful compared to the ones where I'm getting tossed around, and just be super clear on who does what is probably like the biggest thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
What makes a good story for a company at an event, right? Like what I mean, I am always when we're working with our customers, we are always trying to uncover something,
Yeah.
some thread that we can find that is again their point of view, that their CEO has, their company has, that they stand on, their differentiation, their value proposition, something there that is like unique and cool that the customer to hear. And if it can be explained to them like really simply, they're like, oh shit, that's amazing,
Right.
right? We're always trying to find that thread and then pull it and kind of work from it as we design and strategize and build for them. But what do you think makes a good story for a company when they're going to an event?
Yeah, it goes back to some of the things I said earlier. When you created this, what did you see to make you want to do this? Like, did you have any points of inspiration that like made you want to make this brand? And then how did that make you feel? Like, what were the emotions? And get really specific. And I asked my,
Mhm.
I'm like, what are the main emotions you feel about your brand? And they're like, well, I feel like really either empowered or I feel moved or sometimes they're like, I'm even scared, to do
Yeah.
this or whatever. But I really try to dig into the emotion side of it because, especially if you're presenting a brand at any of these public forums, the emotion thing, I mean, we're all human at the end of the day. And I really do like to be a little philosophical when it comes to business sometimes because that's what really connects people. We can have our niceties and the emails and all the things that we do back and forth and as people in business, but if you're able to deeply connect with somebody and tell a story, and that's what makes a good story, is being able to root back to why somebody did something at like a deeper level. And
Mhm.
for example, I client at the New England Boat Show, and it's at the convention center in Boston, and they were presenting this like amazing sailboat, this person I was working with, and they said, I got into sailing because it was something my grandfather really loved, and it was like our special time together, and we would like sit on the sailboat and we would talk about life and he would teach me things, and now like sailboats was this person's life.
Mhm.
And they wanted to sell boats, they wanted to sail them, all the things. And so at their booth, essentially at the show, I had printed pictures of the grandfather and
That's cool.
the
Yeah.
young boy together, and put that at the table, so there was like people was like, what's that, that's kind of different.
Yeah,
And
it connects the dots.
it
Yeah.
does. And then there was a little story, like short story write up of what it was if people were just like walking by the table and wanted to see, and they're like, wow, like this is deeper than just buying a boat.
Yeah.
A boat can symbolize time with your family, it can symbolize tradition, it can symbolize something like legacy, something
Yeah.
way deeper. So it really, you gotta, it's in trust and vulnerability is something you have to earn with a client or a brand or anybody you're working with. But ultimately, like that's the goal. And that's what I see the most success, with, is when you're able to tap that vein.
For sure. I like that. It's a great example. What about somebody that works at a very large company that's
Mhm.
managing and executing their trade shows and their events for this, call it a said software company, whatever, right? They don't have the founder story. They don't have, it's not their company. They didn't start it, but they're looking to utilize one that's there or find it or help tell a story at a trade show or an event. Like, you ever worked with anybody like that where you'd have any advice on how? I find a lot of people really struggle with that. And that's where the disconnect with marketing comes in. They don't have the story from marketing, but
Right.
they need it to execute the trade show or the event.
Yeah, when the root of the passion isn't there, if it's not their own story to tell, there definitely can be a disconnect. And that's when I ask people, maybe for some people it is for money or is a job,
Yeah.
at the end of the day. And sometimes that's just the reality. But, they could have maybe gotten any other job. So why this? You really have, sometimes it does feel like, kind of pulling at straws. It's something, okay, like I signed up for this company because I think tech is the future in a lot of ways. And okay, great. So why do you think it's the future? Well, based off of what I've seen over the last couple years and based off of my own experience. Okay, great. So like it might be as deep as like the grandfather story, right? But
Yeah.
just putting on someone's, helping them put on their thinking cap of like, really, why
Yeah.
did you just want to do this, or why you really have to just get as much as you can, even if it's not the
Mhm.
deepest thing in the world, if that makes sense. But just like, again, it goes back to simplicity. Like, why did you do this? Okay, let's share that story because if you feel that way, other people feel that way. It's
Yeah.
better than just sitting there at a booth, silent, just letting people walk by and giving them a flyer.
When I was preparing for our podcast, I wrote down these four words. I wrote down messaging, purpose, goals, and experience. Wrote down those four words. So just like touch on those four words or just kind of talk out loud about them. I don't know why those were the four that came to me. They just did, and I wrote them down. Because when I think about strategy, which I believe in events is kind of a bit of a lost art, I think too many companies are just executing blindly, right?
Yep,
Or
yep.
kind of running the same playbook. They're just, they're like hamster on the wheel. They're just keeping going. These are the four things that I kind of think about a little bit.
So you said messaging, purpose, goals, and what was the last one?
Experience.
Experience.
I'll tell you how I think about them, but I want to hear your thoughts and how you perceive them.
First of all, those are all connected in my mind when it comes to
Hmm.
something
Hmm.
like this. I don't think they're
Yeah.
exclusive to each other because if you don't have a purpose, you're really not going to have great messaging. And then your goals are not going to align and experience is going to,
Hmm.
go to hell. So it's kind
Hmm.
of like it's the whole thing. I'm trying to look at like a hierarchy, maybe which one I would like rank, but
However you want.
I really do think purpose, if you have some semblance of it, is going to be the most important because that's going to organically go into the message. You said it, I said it, I've said it a million times in this podcast. It's a story. You got to tell the story,
Hmm.
and then I can not say that enough. Having the goal, again, that's that clear communication in the beginning of expectations, goals and expectations. Again, hand in hand. You got to know what you're going into. You got to know who is doing what and who's in charge on both ends, and
Hmm.
the experience part of it is, I mean, you got to remember you're a team. All sides are a team. You are not competitors against each other. You're not trying to outshine each other in any way. You're trying to have the most unified front as both the event coordinators and the marketers to create like the best experience. But I mean, I'd be really curious to hear what your thoughts take are on it.
Similar in the sense that I think they're all connected, right? Like I do. I think they're all connected. The purpose I think is one of the biggest ones. To me, like the easiest way to describe it is like, what is the point of all this?
Right.
What is the point of throwing this event? Like, yeah, it's cool and be great to get our customers here, but it's like, what are we really trying to do? Right.
Mhm.
And I love getting that foundational information. Some companies, very black and white, very clear what they want, what the big picture kind of goal is. For example, we talked to a company the other day. We're on the phone with the CEO and he just black and white was like, we need to cross sell way better than we are. We have silos of like product and divisions, and we're not cross selling. He goes, and that is the ticket to get to this next level. Like, very clear. That's the purpose. Like, that is flat out when they're going to, right? Very simple. Goals, I think, ties easily to it. Like I said, it's importance because goals to me is saying most companies, when someone like yourself or I or others work with them, they're not like, oh, hey, I started the company yesterday and I want to go do this event. No, it's typically like, well, we've been doing all this and we want to do it better, or we're trying to do it different. Well, okay, goals to me are explain to me the delta.
Yeah.
Tell me the difference on where you are at and where you want to be. And
Yep.
then we'll create goals from there, right? Messaging, messaging, I kind of like, I think I probably too much like romanticize about it. Like it's hard, you know what I mean? Like you want this like incredible one-liner or message or theme, but I think like I said, messaging is so vital because it has to tie back into your point of view, your differentiation, a story you're pulling on that will resonate with a customer. Either a problem that they're trying to solve. I mean, there's a laundry list of things I think you could do,
Yep.
but creating really good messaging through themes and different things, I think is just so invaluable when you find a way to do it right and simplify it.
Agreed.
And then experience for me, man, events just like if you don't deliver a good experience, you will not create demand for what you do or for that event or for people to come back. Experience is everything. And part of the leverage of events is, and I say events are a catalyst because that face-to-face piece, it's so different than being on a Zoom or being, on a sales call, a demo when you're face-to-face. So that experience kind of leverages that for you and kind of amplifies it to me.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And I really do think the experience and messaging part really is, it appeals to the senses, down to what you see, what you smell, what you hear, everything. I think that's really important too. And what I've done with some of my clients is, when it comes to senses, is and that messaging goes beyond just the one liner. It's, you put the bold piece of clothing out front, the red dress instead of the black one or something. It appeal in. Okay, great. What kind of music kind of is this vibe? Is that dress? Oh, for that one client, it was beachy music. We put some beachy type reggae in the background. Okay,
Mhm.
great. What smell do we have? We made a candle. It was like surf wax. Okay, put that up front. And since it, depends of what if you're allowed to do,
Yeah.
night sounds. But things
Yeah.
like that, I think that really ties into that message.
Candles are
Yeah, it was an
a
outdoor.
fringe.
It was,
They're a
it
heavy
was,
fringe. They're a
it's
fringe at the
fringe. If you
convention
can't do the
centers.
smell, maybe bake some fresh cookies or something,
Yep.
But things like that I think really goes
Yeah.
into that experience in messaging is the senses and something that is
Mm.
not professionals know that, but it is underrated, I think, across the board that again, like a business card or piece of paper is not always going to get it across. Sometimes you're going to need a little music or a little color or something that's
Yeah.
just going to just make you stand out and get people to come back or remember you, even if they don't do anything with you that
Mhm.
day. Like, oh, what was the place with that red dress or that cool song that was playing or so.
That makes me think of a client that I had years ago. What was her name? It was like Kim Carmichael, I forget her last name, but we built trade show booth for them. Good
Mhm.
size one. It was the first year we are ever working with them. This is probably back in like 2015, 16. And I'll never forget going down to the trade show floor. And I got there like midway through the first day. And when I showed up, I was just I was like, I couldn't believe what this woman was doing.
Mhm.
But she was like hiding under they had like a bar counter in the middle of their booth with a TV behind it and stuff. And it was a bigger booth. It was like a 20 by 40 or something. She literally had I don't know if you've ever seen these before, but she had an Otis Spunkmeyer cookie maker. Like the toaster, the Otis
Oh
Spunkmeyer
yeah.
ones.
Oh
And
yeah.
then you buy the cookies that you slice up and throw them in.
Yep.
This woman, Kim, was, I mean, baking Otis Spunkmeyer cookies in this toaster in her booth, which they told her, like, no stoves, no nothing. Under the thing and
Brilliant.
baking these cookies and then slide. And it smelled amazing because
Exactly.
it has that smell. And I was just like, I mean, this is what she was doing the whole show. And people were just lined up for these cookies. So it definitely,
Yep.
there's something to it
There's
for
some to it.
sure.
It's brilliant. Sometimes you gotta ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
You know
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not.
I've been there.
But I love that. Like that's what I mean though. Like you
Yeah.
remember that,
Yep. I think people have a lot of like random ideas.
Yep.
They're like, oh, we should do this.
Uh,
And I'm always like, well, walk me through why.
right.
And they're like, well, they can't. And then they're like, oh, well, it's a cool idea. I'm like, is it? Is it? I don't know. Is it? Like, how does it tie? How does it work? So talk to me about some of the things you were just talking about, like when people are at events, like how they stand out, how they grab attention, and sort of maybe like a good process for like coming up with an area where they can think and ideate, whether it's giveaways or whether all these different things that event marketers have to do, rather than just being like, oh, I saw somebody doing a X and I want to do that, right? Like, what's a
Right.
bit of a process for that?
Yep. I always tell my clients who are going to these shows, you want to make people feel they're walking into the front door of your home. The setups are different, but let's say there's a table.
Yeah.
Stand in front of the table, like you're welcoming somebody into your front door. And when you have company over, you're usually pretty happy they're there for the most part if you invited them.
Some sites,
Yeah.
it depends, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But if you
that's
have
a
like if you
big
if
maybe.
yeah, if you're having like a great friend over, think about that. Like
Yeah.
looking forward to just like kicking back with them, having a
Yeah.
good time. You're waiting for them at the door, you open it, it's like a big smile. Hey, what's up? And it's not this
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, here's this is what we are. It's not this like really unauthentic, thing. Hey, welcome
Hey,
in.
my house, we're this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like you're not doing
We're
that.
neat freaks. Yeah.
Right,
I gotcha.
right, right. So you want to welcome somebody in calmly and like, hi, like, how are you? Welcome very
Yeah.
warmly, exactly how you would welcome your best friend into your home. Like,
Yeah.
and what do you do when somebody comes into your home? Hey, can I offer you anything? Instead of offering them, a drink, you're like, hey, can I offer you my product, essentially,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
and people can sniff off you if you're being
Mm.
unauthentic. Like it's
Yeah.
like a repellent if you are overexcited and desperate and all these things.
Mm.
So if you're
Yeah.
able to take like a few breaths before you go into that show and you're like, I'm literally just gonna, I'm passionate about why I'm here. I'm excited, but I can do that in a way that is like calm, warm, and welcoming. It's
Mm.
really about demeanor. Yes, there's all those other layers of having the right information, but if you don't have the right demeanor, or you don't send the person to the show with the right demeanor. Sometimes companies just send the wrong person.
Yeah.
That's okay. That person is their strengths are somewhere else in the office, maybe not right there. Think about the person in your office or on your team that is just like that person that everyone goes to. They're really relatable. They're really easy to be around, you know? And some people just
Yeah.
have that gift, and it's something you could definitely grow upon in yourself. But some people just have it stronger than others. And of course, if you can have those sensory things, you know, as much as you can, like you said, it depends on the place and where. That's a huge get too. And if you notice, you know, that somebody is, you know, wearing a certain thing, if it's a fashion brand you're working with, you're like, oh my gosh, like I love that. That reminds me of this. But if you know,
Mhm.
if you go and you're shopping and there's a sales associate in a store and they're like down your throat, you're like nervous shopping there. You know, you're like, okay,
Yeah,
I don't feel
absolutely.
comfortable being in here. They're like, oh, like, did you try this? Have you seen this? Have you do you know, you're like, okay, I don't even want to be here. I just kind of came in here to,
Yeah.
you know, just browse and see if there was anything that I wanted to do. So if you have that same energy in a booth, like people are going to be repelled by it. I
That literally just happened to me in New York City. I was at Saks Fifth,
yeah.
and my
Mhm.
wife and I we were going to see the tree and cruising around. We are there for a wedding weekend with some friends and stuff, and we were going out for the night. And
Mhm.
we like I wanted to go to Saks Fifth. She wanted to get some stuff. I wanted to get like a winter coat, some things like that. And we were in I think it was like the Ralph Lauren section. I mean, this woman was I was just looking for a jacket, like all over me, like bringing stuff to
Yeah,
me too much per
too much.
se. I love your analogy of saying welcoming someone into your home because if you think like if you're having a couple of your best friends or family members or people to your home for the weekend or for an evening, like the smell, the visuals, the
Yeah.
experience that you give them. Like, for example, if somebody is a bourbon drinker,
Yep.
you would typically probably have like a nice bourbon for them to drink in your home, right? I literally every year on the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
three of my best friends that I grew up with in New Jersey, one lives in Houston now, the other two live in New Jersey, but they come in for Super Bowl weekend and they just hang at my house. My wife actually doesn't love it, but we hang, but she likes them, so she
Yeah,
deals
yeah.
with it. But I always think about when they come in for that weekend.
Right.
It's like, what are we going to do? The food, the setup, right? The backyard, the TV, like how we're watching the Super Bowl, like all different things from like, what's the experience like for that weekend for them? And you're just conscious of all these things. And I think that's really great advice for somebody is you're tailoring it. It's authentic, but you're also tailoring it to them,
Exactly.
and that's what people do with their customers. Who are the customers and how
Exactly.
can you tailor this to them?
Yeah, I love that Super Bowl example because it really you like you are prepared. You know which friends are
Yeah.
type of friends that are coming, what they like to drink, what
Yep.
they like to eat, maybe what you kind of have to be prepared for, but it's not in a way that you are like super overbearing or nervous or anything. It's
No.
like I know my people, I know my audience, and that comes with preparation on the business side of
Yeah.
I know who the type of people that are going to be there. So let me just
Yep.
make sure I'm prepared to welcome them in my space
Yep.
and let it roll because to that
Yep.
Saks Fifth Avenue story you just told, like you feel attracted to something like that,
No.
and you're more
When someone's
like
like, "Hey, what can I get you? What do you need for
yeah,
this? Do you want that? Hey, I got you this. You want to get like it becomes way too
yeah,
pushy, too much.
you're more likely to spend more money if that person is not breathing down your throat because maybe you'll grab 3 items because you have more time maybe instead of
Just give them an experience they'd like.
exactly, exactly. Mhm.
Nice. Working with clients, what is maybe a deliverable that you do for somebody that maybe not enough companies ask for or that has worked really well that you think others should be thinking about and doing or at least sort of like endeavoring down? Because I find a lot of times when people do strategy work,
Yeah,
a really easy way not to sell strategy, but to say like, hey, we actually did this for A, B, and C,
yeah,
and it was a little bit customized to them, but like you might benefit from it too. So I'm just curious, like, as you're doing all this work, like,
yeah,
what are some areas that you think more companies should be maybe strategizing themselves or bringing a person like yourself in to be doing?
yeah. That's a good question. I think there's some layers to that. It's just the basics, Matt. I really believe in it wholeheartedly. That's
Yeah.
my bread and butter. And if, I can't make it to the event physically, I send the deliverables, and I put very clear instructions to my clients. This is what you're printing, this is
Yeah.
what you're laminating, this is what you're highlighting, and this is what you're gonna plop on the desk of the event coordinator, shake their hand very kindly, warmly,
Mhm.
and like a step by step, like how to show up is like the biggest thing. How you're going to show up to the event down to like, what are you going to wear that is going to
Yeah.
present you in a certain way, but beyond that, like it might present you a certain way, but like are you even comfortable in that? Like let's make sure you feel like think of the outfit you're best in, you're putting that on today. Like like you're doing that
Yeah.
really in the details, the basics. And I think that the big picture stuff and in strategy is a lot of picture, but for it to be
Yeah.
executed in the best way possible, it's attention to the basics and the detail.
Yeah.
So I would say that.
I think you kind of the plane nicely there. It's how this concept of how you show up, I think, is really important. And I think there's a lot of details that go in there,
Yep.
right? So I think about companies working with us. At times we've talked to them about theming some outfits, theming some sneakers, right? Different style things, and the way you present yourself. Is your staff prepared? Are people eating in the booth, right? What's the positive? What's kind of like the overall vibe
Yeah.
inside of this booth, right? What's the energy of your team? Like, do you have that stuff structured out? And those are, like you said, small things, but they're details. And
Yep.
those details really do matter. And I think sometimes people do need help with that. I think people do need someone to bring to their attention that, like, this stuff matters and it should be scripted. And you should have, not maybe not scripted, but like direction saying, like, hey, this is how we want to act. This is how we want to behave. We want the mood to be up. I know when we ran our host event, right? So we did a host event in Orlando. We brought in close to 30 like VP level event marketers. And like I told my team the night before in an email, I
Mhm.
said, I am absolutely expecting your best for the next 3 days.
Yep.
I said, that's my expectation, is that you are personable, you are upbeat, you are positive, you are welcoming, you are curious. And I gave him this list of like, this is who I want to be
Yep.
during this time frame. And those details to me, it's like, spend the energy for 3 days.
Yep.
Be curious, talk to people. If you see someone sitting by themselves or not, intro them to someone, make that extra step. And I think those details and how you show up is it's a superpower for sure.
100%. And it is now it's like, in-person events. And I
Yeah.
think something that's really interesting that I noticed when I watch old movies or shows, or I've even like Googled this of like department stores, like Macy's in its glory days,
Oh
60s,
yeah.
70s, you're walking
Yeah.
cosmetic counters. I mean,
Yeah.
the women and men that are behind those counters, there's not a hair out of place. They are smiling,
hmm
they're there. And
Yeah.
that's when, the business was highest for them, back in the
Yeah.
day,
For sure.
person. That's going back to those roots of like what worked for places like that and
Yeah.
why it's important to like have that cohesiveness.
Nice. Laura, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you doing with this with me. Where can people find you? I mean, you're LinkedIn. I don't know if you're on Instagram or anything like that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
let them know.
LinkedIn, Laura McKinney, and also Strata Brand. Strata Brand spelled Strata brand. And also Strata Brand's on Instagram, Strata Brand, just the name. And then I'm on Instagram, Laura McKinney 13.
Beautiful. Awesome. Laura, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.